Hi everybody, thanks for dropping by the Demo Pavilion. My name's Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Solutions Architect here at NETSCOUT, and what we're going to be covering at this particular pavilion is a demonstration and a discussion about data export from the NETSCOUT family of products, so that maybe you could combine that data with other types of data and other ITOps tools or dashboards. So let's go ahead and let's move forward. But in this example, and when I'm going to show you the demo, we have done the analysis already. If this is something of interest that actually needs to have some action, or just something of interest that can be combined with other pieces of data to drive your IT ops overall dashboards or alerts or alarms or information or big data queries. The other way I talked about, the way that actually works, is rather than have all of this voluminous data, as well as the work of having to send that data off to a variety of different big data tools. And again, I'm talking about that data that is the actual raw ASI data itself. It's not inclusive of our analysis. It can be voluminous, and so really you're kind of storing that data twice, but depending on the use case that you're interested in, that might be something that it just kind of comes with it and you're going to have to do. But let's say you've made that decision. So that information is actually going to pass through a secondary system, one of our streamer type products like our NEA device, where all of that information is actually being pulled into that box once, and then that box is preparing that data for either query by other systems, or it's going to publish it in some sort of channel format where other devices can subscribe to it to actually pull out maybe not all that voluminous information, but maybe just the information that they need to be able to do their particular type of analysis. Now on the screen here, I happen to put in Kafka here, but it could, there's several different formats that we support. Okay, let's get started. So the nGeniusONE server that I'm going to use for this demo, where all my data that I'm exporting is going to come from, this is the same system you're probably used to looking at most days, or maybe folks that work for you are using the system to answer questions and handle day-to-day issues and problems. But really the information is the same pieces that folks are used to looking at every day. So, and the different types of use cases. I've got a variety of different devices in here. I've got vStreams, I've got regular physical infinite streams, I've got some NetFlow devices. I think I've got a UC collector in here. I got a variety of different things. And these things are seeing a bunch of different hosts, different conversations, applications, and a variety of VLANs and VXLAN tags and QoS buckets and really you name it. So I've got a number of services, alerts, alarms, events, and then as you can see here, the system itself with no direction whatsoever is just looking for things that probably need to be addressed that haven't already been assigned to something else. And all this information is the same thing that's driving all the dashboards and grids that you have today. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to, I'll start with Splunk. So here is Splunk interface. The data from the system that we have, I have coming in here, and you can see it's kind of voluminous. So to try to make this a little bit easier for this demo here, I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. And I'm going to say just from that particular nGeniusONE server and just for the last 24 hours. So this is the data as it comes in. Now remember, this is event data, so this is taking advantage of our analysis of what's going on. But we have provided Splunk a template, so it knows how to break down all the different fields in our information into individual fields and with labels for those fields that are in Splunk itself. Now, I'm not going to give you a Splunk lesson, but really it's going to take all the differences here and provide them in a big list. You can pivot, select, drill in, anything that you can imagine you might do maybe in Excel, you could do in Splunk just as easy. And perhaps this data set also has other data that might be coming from other types of system that might be mixed in here as well. So one of the things I did want to point out is if you notice, one of the fields that we often have in here, since we've already provided the analysis, is usually a URL where we're going to point you to the evidence for our analysis so that you have an opportunity to take a look at this information, launch back in context into nGeniusONE, and that's going to really be in any of our data sets that we send out, and it doesn't matter who's using them, whether it's, in this case, Splunk, but could be Elk or really something else. So if you need additional information, you don't have to build a lot of logic. You can just launch back into the tool in question. In this case, it's going to be nGeniusONE, and continue your investigations from there. Now, these URLs are kind of based off of our APIs, which allow you to launch into the different screens that are in nGeniusONE. So I've got a variety of them here that that you can see. I've got them set up for, depending on what fields are available and what's in those fields is going to control what actually shows up in this event action. But I've got some in here to be able to go and actually look at the alerts and alarms themselves. I've got some that are set to just go look at the application. I've got other ones where I can look at the service definition that it's part of. I'll just show you one example real quick. We'll just do this real quick. Does take a second for it to load. So in this case, what it did is it chose the application name, which in this case was SharePoint MySQL, and for the time frame that it picked up out of that alert, it's showing me everything that nGeniusONE knows about that particular application. This could be a site, this could be in a particular alert ID, in which case you would launch into the notification center, which I'll show you one of those here. So it would launch directly into perhaps one of these actual event numbers that was in the information that was being sent out to Splunk. So really pretty powerful from a usage point of view. So from that, what I've done is I've built a variety of use cases. Now, from the list that I provided, and I have pre-built those into some searches and views. You can see I've got a couple of them in here that I've built. But really how you're going to use those for the most part is probably in a dashboard. So I built several of them here. Let's take a look at one here. So this one's pretty simple. It's just covering the worst servers by situation and availability events. So those who have the most of these are going to show up on this list. Now I've got my list set to, really I think it's top 20 this time. It could be top 5, top 10, whatever you want to make it. I've thrown 3 different panels on here. One where I've got a pie chart that shows the representation for, this is for the last hour. I've got the actual number of events that if I blow this up, I'll be able to actually see the server IPs will be listed here. And then, and again, I said I had this set for top 20. So, but I do have a complete set of all of the IPs I've saw from most to least on this particular network segment in this particular view. So let's take another look at another example real quick. Let's see. Oh, this is always a good one. I talked about wanting to invest my time for cleanup on things where I'll get the biggest return for investment. Just knowing the number of events, the number of issues, and the different kinds. So not just total number, but also the number of events by the type and kind of the event that it is. Is it service disrupting? Is it informational? I could take that down maybe even a little further and say it is, perhaps tie it to a particular type of application or set of applications. I can make up my own math for this as I go. So in this case, this view is pretty simple. I just got these are the different interfaces on the different InfiniStreams that I've chose. And in your world, these would probably have a better name that would talk about the actual network segment that they're watching. And I get a pretty good visual idea of which one is generating the most events. Now, what I did do here is, because the one that's carrying the most traffic was skewing my view initially, is I did take this out, and what I did is I divided it into the number of unique IPs that I saw. And actually, it didn't really change this graph too much, but I figured that was a better way to take a look at this information by segment, to be able to see, where am I getting the most events per server, which segment has those, and where do I need to start focusing my cleanup time on, and maybe even defining some projects to be able to do that. So let's take a look at another demo. This one is Elasticsearch, very similar to Splunk. This data that's in here is not the event data where we've applied our analysis. So this is actually the raw ASI data that's going in here. And so if I was going to do some analysis here, I'd have to probably recreate some of that methodology and the math and the searches and the regex language to be able to support that. So very similar to what I did in Splunk is I've taken this information and I've created a variety of searches on it. I'll let this run here for just a minute. You can see here's the data, and again I'm breaking it down into all the different kinds of fields and information that we're going to publish out on this Kafka feed that this ELK server is actually subscribing to. So from that I can once I've prepared these views, then or these searches, then I can prepare views for these. Let's go down to visualize. Maybe. Let's just go into dashboards. So I prepare different views, and really each of these panels is a different view, and those are based off of the searches. So what I've done is built some searches to support the different use cases, built some interesting views around those, and combined those into dashboards to drive the different ITOP suggestions that I have, use case suggestions. So this particular one is I'm actually looking at the total number of, in this case, the total number of applications that happen to be DNS in this particular network segment. And I'm looking at the count of those over time. I'm taking a look at the IP addresses, the top 5 IP addresses that are involved in servicing these. I've actually got a list here that I can expand on and see individual measurements and information about each one of these individually. And then how many total unique systems do I see involved with this for this time period on this network segment. So right here, I'm just showing my top 5. This happens to be my biggest DNS server. And but the total number of servers, and in this case, I also have the clients that are making use of this system. I decided I would just put those on a speedometer. So up here, I'm going to actually take that view out. I'm going to go ahead and choose a different time frame. Let's widen it out a little bit. Let's say that's 24 hours. So we get a little prettier of a view here. And I'm going to select maybe something else here. So let's say HTTP for this particular time slot. So I'll go ahead and I'll select that. You can see that I chose HTTP. Here's the time slot. I'm going to apply that. And everything else that I put on this dashboard will follow suit with that. The number of choices you have for being able to display this information, make your own metrics. It's really unlimited. Again, I don't want to make this a session trying to teach you how to use Elasticsearch as part of ELK or to use Splunk, but I did want to take the time to at least show you some different ways that you could use this information, and outputting it is really very easy. That'll be the easiest thing that you do is getting the data out of the system, and really depending on the platform that you're using, this combining of the data and visualizing the data is really pretty easy in these other tools. So hopefully this is going to drive some thoughts, some conversations, and some ideas. Please let us know how we can help you, and we'd be glad to start a conversation. Thanks.